Welcome, everyone, to the Teaching Edge podcast. I'm thrilled to have with me today Dave Burgess. Dave is an acclaimed educator, speaker, and author renowned for his creative and dynamic approach to teaching. With over 17 years of classroom experience, Dave has inspired educators globally to engage students through innovative methods and a passion for learning. He's the author of the best-selling book, Teach Like a Pirate, which encourages teachers to make their classrooms adventurous, memorable, and impactful. As the co-founder of Dave Burgess Consulting Inc., Dave has expanded his influence by publishing numerous authors in the field of education, providing a platform for voices that challenge, inspire, and elevate teaching practices worldwide. Welcome, Dave, to the show. It's wonderful to have you here.
Hey, it is my pleasure to join you. Thank you so much for having me on.
That's wonderful, wonderful. It's a great opportunity for all of us. And let's start going right in to your core concept of teaching like a pirate. If you have to give it like a brief nutshell explanation, what is it, teaching like a pirate?
Okay, so it has nothing to do with the dictionary definition of pirate, right? We don't want teachers to go out and attack and rob ships at sea or anything like that, right? So it has everything to do with the spirit of a pirate. And so to me, the spirit of a pirate is someone who is unconventional, someone who's willing to reject the status quo, someone who's willing to sail into uncharted waters with no guarantee of success, a risk taker, rebel, maverick in the classroom. So it's about embracing that spirit of being a pirate. In addition to that, pirates are known for having hooks, and this is all about how you could hook students and draw them almost magically or magnetically into what you're doing in your rooms. And then it also serves as an acronym. So the P-I-R-A-T-E of the word pirate, I turned it into an acronym. And so that's kind of the three layers of the whole pirate metaphor.
Wonderful, wonderful. Why don't we look at this? I like looking at examples. So if you want to take anything that comes to mind, how would conventional teaching look like, and how would the pirate ideas look like in that situation?
Right. So here's an example. Like if you walk into my classroom, if you walk into a classroom, you sit down at a desk in a straight row, and I stand up at the front and I lecture you about prohibition and speakeasies, like that's a lesson. That's a lesson. But if
Yeah.
you come to my door and you find it locked and you have to knock, and then it opens about 6 inches, and I'm standing there in a pinstripe gangster outfit, and I'm asking you for a password, and you don't come in unless you know the password. And when you do come in, you're immediately hit with 20s music, but it's too dark to see. And then you enter through a little curtain that wasn't there the day before. The whole room's been transformed, and your eyes are adjusting to the accent lights, and you think you might see a bar in the front, and that could be a bartender up there. You go up the front, you order a drink, you get served a drink, and then you go sit down at a table that's got some gambling items out on. Like that is an experience. So don't just teach a lesson, create an experience for kids. Lessons are easily forgotten. Experiences live forever. So this is all about taking our lesson, our content, and saying like, all right, here's my content. Not good enough. How do I make this memorable? How do I make this come alive? How do I create an experience around this? So it's adding that richness to our lessons and our curriculum that draw students in and make it seem like a more magical place to be.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And for teachers listening to us, if someone is listening to this and hearing your concepts for the first time, they may ask themselves, well, how practical is this? I'm not going to turn my classroom into a bar and have the lights off and not let students in and so on. I'm sure you get these kinds of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so first thing I would tell them is this is not every day, right? So I'm not
Okay.
transforming my classroom every day. If you were to walk in my classroom on any given day, like most of the time, you're going to see kids collaborating, working together,
Yeah.
owning their own learning, creating, making, doing things, right? But what I do is I use these things to grab their attention, to hook them. It's kind of like a hook and release. Like if you're someone who fishes, you know, about
Yeah.
hooking and releasing. So I'm hooking them, I'm drawing them in at the beginning, and then I'm releasing them to own their learning and to do their work and to collaborate, connect, and create, right? And so all these things can be done in a very minimal fashion. So we're not talking about, like sometimes when people see me present, they'll say, okay, I'm exhausted just watching that. Like I can't do that every day. So, oh no, wait a second. You're watching a highlight reel of my
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah.
I'm putting together one after another a highlight reel of some of the more spectacular things that I do in class and explaining them to why they work, right? But that's not the reality in my classroom day to day. but you can add these elements in very small ways to transform your class.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'll take this opportunity actually to recommend to anyone listening to search for your TEDx talk, which is great. Start with a wonderful demonstration. I really loved watching it. Really wonderful. Now, if we go back, what inspired you to become a teacher and to give this inspiration to others? Was there someone in particular, or some kind of event? What really drove you to this?
Okay, so I always tell people my gateway drug into education was as a coach. So I was hired as a basketball coach before I even had a teaching credential. Went back, I love working with the children so much, love working with the kids so much. I went back to night school and got a teacher credential and began to teach at the school where I was coaching. Eventually became so obsessed with teaching that I left the coaching behind. And as far as a person, even my first job as a human being is I worked 3 summers for John Wooden at the John Wooden basketball camps in Thousand Oaks, California. And so generally considered one of the greatest coaches of all time, certainly in basketball, maybe in any sport. So at a very formative time in my life, I got to work 3 consecutive summers for John Wooden, and I got to see him do like his pyramid of success speech, week after week after week. I got to see him instruct the players in the camps and help him with that and be part of the, an assistant and all that kind of stuff like that. And so seeing that he's a master teacher, not just a coach, he's a master teacher. And so that early influence of John Wooden and then using basketball to get into the educational system is kind of where it all began for me.
So you were excited about the ability to reach these kids. What really drove you, or even drives you today? What's the if you had to pinpoint one key thing that excites you every day about all of this?
Yeah, so for me, it's what I call an LCL, and trying to add LCLs into everything that I teach. And LCL is a life-changing lesson. So it's embracing that mightier purpose of being an educator and understanding that our content, our curriculum is like kind of the top of the iceberg, but below the surface of what we're doing is we're having this life-changing impact on students. And so it's that's what gets me fired up to come to school. I do not get fired up like as a U.S. history teacher. Hey, like I'm not that fired up about railroad, like teaching the history of railroads or even the Industrial Revolution, whatever it might be, Spanish-American War. Sure, I know this is part of my curriculum. I have to teach it, but I'm more interested in what kind of impact I'm having on them as human beings.
Now, do you have an example in mind of a student who actually, of course, you saw this a lot, but just pick any of your, most memorable stories of someone who you saw was so impacted by this kind of teaching?
So the stories that I love the most are stories where I have students who have left my class and then come back to me years later and said, hey, like after leaving your class, I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And so I have a whole network of ex-students who have entered the educational field and become teachers. And it's always like a great honor to try to help them and work with them. I send them out my book, send them other books that we published and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of is the number of students who have left my class, been a part of my class, and then decided that they wanted to do that themselves and join the educational field.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I wanted to ask you about a term that I have heard you mention a lot, which is relevancy. And how do we address this relevancy issue when students are they come to school, they have to study what's there, and immediately the question is raised, why do I need to study this? How is this relevant for me? How do you actually explain this to a student? Or maybe you don't think some is really relevant. So sometimes teachers might say, well, I really agree that this is, I don't know why we need to learn any of this, but still you cannot present this to the student, of course. So I would love to hear your thoughts about this.
Right. And so this is where this is not just a student thing, this is an adult thing too. And this is one of the things that I tell teachers. I'm
Yeah.
like, listen, when you learn something, when you go through professional development or you have to sit through some meeting or whatever it might be, well, what do you expect out of that learning situation, that professional development? You want it to be relevant to you. And like if it's not relevant for you, then you're wondering, what are you doing there, right? And so why do we expect anything less from our students? They also want to see the relevancy of what we're teaching them. They want to know that relevancy. And so part of our job as educators is to show that to them and to give them examples of it. And that's why I think it's so important to, again, it's this concept of it's not just your content and your curriculum, it's this larger, mightier purpose of what you're doing as an educator. And so, for example, I've had students come to me I'm not a math teacher, but they might come into my class and say, oh my God, like we did this in math today. When am I ever going to use that again? That's a common phrase
Yeah.
for kids. Like, when am
Yeah.
I ever going to use this in my real life? I'm like, okay, you know what? To be honest with you, you might not use that formula in your real life ever. I'm going to be honest with you, right? But the kind of logical thinking skills that it takes to do math, the kind of habits that you're forming in order to get through that course, all of those kind of things are going to be things that you're going to use and are going to make you like wildly successful in your life, right? And so maybe you're not going to use that theorem, that mathematical theorem again. But what you needed to be able to get through that and to be able those critical thinking skills and logical thinking skills and habits of thought and just the kind of perseverance that it took and all of these kind of character issues, those are things that are going to be super important to you. And those are things that we can talk to kids about too, that we don't often talk to kids about. Even just, I think it's a little bit of a cliche right now to talk about a growth mindset. But some things are cliche for a reason. They're cliche because they're talked about so often because they're important. And that's the same thing, like, for example, with a growth mindset. And so all of these kind of more character-based things are things which we can draw on, even if maybe that particular day of content or curriculum, it's going to be really kind of tough to show them why it's going to be important that they're going to know that, 15 years from now.
Yeah. And what kind of responses do you get from students who get this answer? You may not be using this theorem, but you are developing your skills. They may not care about it at that particular moment in time.
Okay, so first, of course, the resistance to this idea, right? But I think that hopefully over time that this sinks in with them. The same thing with, say, like maybe like a standardized test. And it's like, what does this score matter to me? Like it's gonna not affect me in any way. It's like it's more for you in the school. This doesn't have anything to do with me. It's like you want me to do well on this test because it makes the school look good or makes you look good as a teacher, but it doesn't impact me. So, well, listen, here's the thing. You might be right about that. But you know what I think is that there's a kind of a mindset that if you're going to do it, then you should do your best at it. And if you are going to if you're going to be an athlete, you're going to try to be the best. You're going to try to live up to your potential and do the best that you possibly can. If you're going to be a business owner, you're going to try to be the best, run the best business that you can in the world, right? How you do anything is how you do everything, right? And so how you approach taking this test, you might not be able to see the importance of it, but let me tell you why it's important. It's important because you're doing it. And so you should bring your best to everything that you do. And so I kind of give them, I try to give them some inspirational, motivational messages around these things. Part of that comes from my background as a coach. How a coach can get a team ready to like knock down a wall coming out of the locker room to perform at their best. Well, I'm trying to use kind of some of those same strategies with my students to get them inspired and understand that this is about personal development as well as it is about learning some content and curriculum.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a couple of things. Just hearing you and watching you answer these questions, I think a great start in two examples that you gave is you started with, you might be right about this. I think this completely disintegrates all the objection, I'm not coming to fight with you. In fact, you might be right. Might be right. We need these scores. We need to show that the school is doing great, and you might be right. And then it opens the door, I think. And for those who are listening rather than watching, I saw you really, you lowered, you leaned in, you spoke to me really. I was really, it was very easy for me to accept this and believe this because you're living in your eye level, you drop your voice, you speak like that, I think that's very, very impactful. I think it's also the way you present it and not only the information. I can imagine a teacher lecturing about why you're building character rather than, saying, I care about this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I, I
that's,
I think that was super perceptive that you picked up on the fact that it's very disarming to agree with someone about
yes.
something that they want to argue, that they're coming to you in a confrontational way, possibly, and expecting there to be that tension. And then when you take that tension away from them and you say, yeah, you know what? I think you're probably right about that. And then it's very disarming.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Um, did you encounter any resistance towards your approach in schools or with teachers? What kind of resistance did you encounter, if any?
Absolutely. So here's one of the areas of resistance that I think is very common that teachers run into. I've run into it before, and I always tell teachers that maybe you're going to maybe get this from colleagues. You might get this from admin, possibly sometimes from parents, although I think rarely. But here it is. People try to set up this false dichotomy that either your class is about learning or your class is about fun, right? And so what I believe is not only can those things go together, they go better together. I call it the Reese's effect. Like they go better together.
Hmm.
But there will be lots of people who try to set up that false dichotomy on you that like, okay, if kids come out of your class and they're laughing and they had fun and it was fun and they enjoyed it, well, you must not be doing serious learning in that room, right? And I think that's something which is a misconception about education. And I think that fun and learning can absolutely go hand in hand. And so that is probably one of the biggest areas of resistance that I've had to face. Just because kids are having fun doesn't mean they're not learning.
Yeah, it might be the other way around. Only once they are having fun, then they're open to learning. I think
Yes.
if you mention history, I think as a child, this was one of my worst subject, the most boring ones. But later, as an adult, I encountered such amazing teachers. Just listening to them speak about history, um, I'm a huge fan of a podcast called Hardcore History. You may know
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And I just listened to like 6 or 7 lectures about World War One. It was blew my mind. And because of the experience, because it was so fun and interesting,
Yeah.
quotes of people from the places and everything. So it completely changed for me. I love history today, and this was one of my worst subjects that I didn't like. Yeah.
Right. And those are long form podcasts. Like those are
Wow.
hours,
Yeah,
hours
hours
long,
and
right? And
hours.
so,
Yeah.
and that just shows you the impact of an educator, what the teacher can do for a subject. The teacher can be the key
Yeah.
determinant of whether that subject comes alive for a student or whether it's destroyed, killed, and and becomes some boring thing that they don't want to know more about.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, if you could change one thing about today's educational system, what would it be if you had the power to change one central thing?
Whew, this is a tough one. So I think what I would change is the overemphasis on standardized test scores.
Mm.
And so I think there's a place for standardized tests. I want students to perform well on the standardized tests, but that is never my primary focus. And so, like for example, an example that I give sometimes is, let's say that I'm teaching my civil rights movement in my U.S. history class. Okay, now what's more important, that the students know the different pieces of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or that they understand um, the the wrongness of injustice and racism, and that they're willing to stand up and fight against these things, and they have developed some sort of sense of uh, the courage to stand up when they see someone being oppressed, right? Well, obviously, anyone would say that it would be more important that they understand that racism is wrong and they're willing to fight oppression when they see it, right? But yet, only one of those things is on the test. And it's the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and them knowing the pieces. And it's very hard to measure the other one. In fact, how could you have a test that could measure how they're going to react later in their life when they are confronted with racism or oppression, right? It can't be measured. And yet it is the central thing that I'm trying to teach my students when I'm doing the civil rights movement, okay? And so it's this understanding that many of the most important things that we do as educators are not measured on any test. And so judging a teacher's effectiveness or a school's effectiveness just simply by a test score just makes no sense to me. Like, you cannot judge a teacher's effectiveness with a standardized test score. Effectiveness of a teacher can only be measured through generations, because that's the kind of impact that we have with students inside of our schools and our classrooms.
But is there a way to measure it?
I'm not just trying to raise test scores. I'm trying to raise human potential, right?
Right.
And that's what is important.
So if you had to make the change, what would the change be? So if there is overemphasis on standardized tests, okay, if the system is willing to not give that much importance, what else would they do?
I think it needs to be a more holistic approach of like how you evaluate teachers and how you evaluate schools. Now, how that's done is super complicated. The reason why we have standardized tests in order to do that is because of the subjective nature of any other form of measurement, right? And so it's easier to look at a test score to judge a teacher or to judge a school or a school system to see whether or not they're doing their job, right? But once we understand the reality of the matter is that is not a full measure of what it's like, when for example, in the Olympics this year, there was a woman, Alana, can't remember her last name, Alana, she was a rugby player. And she was being body shamed by some people online because she's a very strong woman, right? And they were talking about her BMI, her body mass index, and like, oh my gosh, her BMI must be so high and all kinds of stuff like this. And she went on and said, wait a second, a BMI is a ridiculous number, because a BMI doesn't show you what my body composition is. It doesn't show you how strong I am, but how much muscle I have, and how like efficiently I move my body as an athlete. And so focusing on the BMI is not a healthy way to look at weight. It's not a healthy way to look at fitness, okay? Because an athlete is going to have a very high BMI because they're muscular, right? And so the same thing is true in school. Focusing on a standardized test score is not the most effective way to measure a teacher or a school. And the fact that it's difficult to measure in a different way doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, and doesn't mean that we should fall back on this easier to understand and easier to gain number of the standardized test score.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. If you had 3 books to gift every teacher, what would these be?
Okay, so I will not be self-serving and use my own, but I'll be.
So I asked for 3 and not 1.
Yeah, so I'll be.
Although you have more than 1.
I will be a little self-serving and choose some that I publish. And so I have a little bit of a recency bias. So we just last week released a project that I'm super excited about with legendary educator Ron Clark, who's co-founder of the Ron Clark Academy. And it's called Be 1% Better, Surprisingly Simple Ways to Transform Your School. And I think what's powerful about this message is that teachers are overwhelmed right now. Educators are overwhelmed. They feel like there's too much on their plate already. So coming to a teacher right now and talking to them about changing everything they do, transforming their whole practice, is just almost a non-starter, okay? But at the same time, we want to have this kind of improvement mindset, right? So what are some very small, simple ways you can move the needle? What are some things you can do that's just a 1% lift, maybe in effort, resources, time? And if we can create and have you brainstorm some 1% ways that maybe you can become a little better at your craft, that seems doable. That's something that we can wrap our head around. And that's something that everyone in a school system can embrace, from the custodial staff to the secretary, administrative assistants, to admin, to teachers. Everyone, even the most experienced and master teacher, has to agree, well, yeah, I could probably find a way, a 1% way to get better, right? So, I mean, it's almost offensive to talk to an experienced, masterful teacher and talk to them about transforming everything they do. Like it's
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
offensive, right?
yeah.
But saying, hey, do you think there's any way you could get 1% better this year? That's doable. And so that would be one book. The second book is almost a completely opposite take of that. George Couros wrote a book called The Innovator's Mindset, which is a little bit more big picture about how, like, a new vision of how we could look at education and create innovative what we want as students that are, we don't want to put better trivial pursuit players in the world that just know a bunch of facts and figures. We want kids that can go out and be innovators and creators in the world. And so The Innovator's Mindset by George Couros would be my second book. And
He's going
then
to be on the podcast as well soon. Yeah,
oh, he's fantastic. You'll love
yeah,
talking to him.
yeah.
Yeah. And then the third book, I'm going to use a wild card selection. And that is that I want to interview whoever I'm getting these books for, find out what they teach, what their interests are. And then I'm going to pick a book for them. Like if they're a mom and they're a teacher, we have a book called Phenomenal Teacher
Yeah,
by Nick Roque about how you can be a mom, an excellent teacher, but then also pursue dreams outside of education as well. And math books, science books. So the third one, I'm gonna do a short interview with the person, and then I'm gonna hand select a book. But those other ones would be for any teacher.
yeah. Wonderful, wonderful, excellent. So be 1% better and innovator's mindset. That were the two, and then third one, based on your goal. Yep. Excellent, excellent. Well, you mentioned moms. I don't know what the statistics say about the move to homeschooling after COVID. I don't know what the statistics are, but I did want to bring up the question. We had two major disruptions in the past few years, completely different. One was COVID, and the other is AI. So what impacts do you think these had or are having still on the teacher, on the student, on the system?
Yeah, so I think so I'll start with COVID. First of all, I think it did a couple things. One, it put a real light on the power, this social emotional learning, and the idea that we need kids to be okay in school, or we need to focus on social emotional aspects of learning, not just the content and the curriculum, right? And because there was so much trauma that was involved with that, and for educators too, and so I love the fact that I think that brought that into focus. It was something I think that was being kind of swept under the carpet for a long time, that we have kids that have trauma in our school systems, and we need to be able to find ways to effectively deal with that. So that's one impact of COVID. The other impact of COVID is I have this kind of very positive spin on it. And obviously it was a very tragic situation. And I know it was very overwhelming for teachers. But here is my positive spin on it. People have always said that change takes a long time in education. Change is very hard in education. Change takes a long time. You can't expect the system to move overnight. This is going to take years to roll out this initiative and things like this, right? But when COVID hit, we saw whole systems change in a week, right? And it was a very unfortunate reason why they had to.
Yeah.
But it showed that we could do it. We took all of our classes online. We took every teacher, across the whole system, all these systems immediately transformed every single thing that they did. Now, it was out of necessity, but I think it kind of forever, hopefully, kind of broke down this paradigm that we have that things have to change slowly in education. No. Things can change right now. We can make differences right now. You can roll out an initiative and if you can get buy-in from educators and from teachers and from the school community, you can change this year. And so don't come to me talking about how this is going to be a 5-year plan. COVID says show we can change overnight. So I think we need to embrace that idea that we don't have to see ourselves as slow to innovate, slow to change, slow to be creative. we can just like other industries that have to change because of the something happens in the marketplace. Same thing can happen for us as educators.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
COVID thing. The AI, I am not fearful of AI. I'm not on the AI is this destructive thing that we need to fear. I see opportunity in AI, but what I see more is just the reality of AI. And so AI is absolutely not going anywhere. It's only going to become more powerful. It's only become more present in our students' lives. And so there's this quote that I love. I used it in my book. It's by R. Buckminster Fuller. He said, "Don't fight forces, use them." And so this is what I think the teachers should be thinking about with AI. This is not something that's going to go away. This is going to be forever part of our future. And so you can either choose to fight that, or you can embrace it, find ways that you can become more efficient, more effective using it, that students are going to be able to become more efficient and effective using it. It's going to be a part of what students do in their, for many of us, many of the students are going to be using AI in their future careers. And so it's incumbent upon us as educators to be the ones that help them deal with this transformation in society and to show them how to use this responsibly and ethically and effectively. And so how could there be this world transformational technology and educators don't want to be a part of that conversation? We should absolutely want to be a part of that conversation, and we should be helping kids to process that.
Do you see any impact of AI these days? The first thing the first things that get impacted, what comes to mind?
Well, so I think that what teachers are fearful of is cheating.
Yeah,
That's the
obviously.
first thing that comes up with them. But I think what we should be looking at is how can we get AI to help us do some of the main mundane tasks of things that just take unbelievable amount of time for humans to do, and have AI help us with those things, which will then free us up to do more creative and innovative and artistic things, right? And so I think I'm not so concerned that AI can write a kid's essay. I'm more concerned the fact that AI maybe can do a lot of the things that are very time consuming and take that off of
Yeah.
our plates and free us up to go do some more, very human things, some very creative and artistic things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot will be used by teachers also for grading, for example, which is very onerous, and I'm sure there will be plenty of ideas that are really helpful. And I think it's your nature to look at to find the positives. So and there are many positives. Regarding technology in general that's used by students, what technologies do you love? Which ones do you disapprove of, if any?
Yeah, and so I'm not a huge expert in educational technology. In fact, if you read Teach Like a Pirate, that's one of the things that people have sometimes pointed out. They'll ask me, they'll say like, "Hey,
Yeah,
how come there's not more ed tech in this book?" And
yeah,
I try to give them a very authentic and honest answer. And I tell them, I'll tell you why there's not much ed tech in that book. It's because I wasn't very good at it. And so
okay,
I wanted it to be written from a very authentic place. Like if it's in that book, it was something that I was using successfully with students in class. If it's not in that book, maybe the reason is because I wasn't using it, or wasn't using it successfully, and I didn't want to write from that inauthentic place. And so that's partly why I became a publisher, because I knew that my message was not the complete message, and I wanted to try to amplify the voices of other people who were doing like fantastic things in other areas like educational technology. But as just kind of a general idea, it kind of is the same. It goes back a little bit to what I was saying with the AI. Is I like technology tools that allow students to make and create. And
Mm,
so I don't tend to favor the educational technology tools which do things which are basically like a high-tech flashcard, or
yeah,
taking worksheet that takes curriculum and worksheets and puts them online for kids to click through. Like things like that's not the technology that I'm interested in at all, but a technology tool that allows the kid to create and kind of bring some of their self and their own voice. I'm into that. I'm also into technology that allows kids to connect and collaborate with each other and to, like, for example, in a classroom, when a teacher asks a question, generally there's a couple groups of people that blurt out answers. They have the hand raisers. There's the fast processors. There's the extroverts and kind of the class clowns. Those three groups of people are very fast at processing information, people that are extroverted and the class clown can dominate a classroom situation. But when you use technology to allow students to answer in a more asynchronous way and to be part of a conversation without having that social anxiety of being put on the spot real quickly to come up with an answer, but they're able to think about it, be thoughtful, and then contribute using their technology, you'll see that some of the quietest kids in our classes, the kids that typically get trampled in a in-person conversation, will have some of the most spectacular and thoughtful answers of all if you actually give them a little bit of time and give them a way which doesn't provoke their social anxiety that they can contribute, right? And so technology that allows participation and contribution from all voices in the classroom, not just the answer blurters, and technology that allows kids to be artistic and creative are the things that I'm drawn to.
Excellent, excellent. What is the most uncommon piece of advice that you have given about teaching that you think most people should know about?
Okay, so uncommon. So when you first said, I was thinking like, what's the most, like the thing I say the most to teach, but I'm going to go with uncommon. I think one of the pieces from the Teach Like a Pirate message that is very uncommon is that I think that teachers should be more interested in reading outside of the profession, especially into books of marketing, sales, and entrepreneurship. And the reason is this. If you think about what a marketer does, a marketer is trying to be as effective as possible at crafting a message in a persuasive way. And what does that marketer want you to do? They want the person to take action. Now, It might be to buy something, it might be to use a service or whatever it might be, but a marketer is trying to very persuasively craft a message to have a person take action. That is exactly what marketing is. And what do we want to do as educators? We want our students to take action and to be a part and to buy into things. And so being able to persuasively craft a message is something that I think is super important for educators. And it's not something that we get trained in our educational programs typically, right? And so I am always encouraging educators to use sales and marketing techniques and to read. I say read wide, live wide, right?
Yeah.
Don't get just stuck in the educational section of the bookstore, but read wide. And in fact, my book, there's something very strange about it. There's not a single education book referenced inside of it. Not a single one. Not because I don't like education books. I published over 200.
Yeah.
It's because that's not where it came from. It was my background as a coach, my background as a marketer and entrepreneur, my background as a magician, my background as all these different things came together to create the best me, right? But Teach Like a Pirate is not about anyone teaching like me. It's about them taking their particular strengths, their talents, their voice, and then weaving it together with some of the human nature ideas behind Teach Like a Pirate to create the best them, right? And so I'm not going around trying to create Dave Burgess clones in the classroom. I have a very unique teaching style, which would not be for everyone, right? But I'm trying to convince teachers that you can take your strengths and talents and voice and then look around the world and always say, how can I use that? What is it that draws people in? Why does that draw people in? And is there any way I can layer those ideas into my classroom to make it more engaging, to make it my presentations more persuasive, right? So that would be, I think, the most unconventional idea, that marketing ideas and training in those and being persuasive like that can be very essential to a teacher's effectiveness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Once you hear it, you understand. Every time a teacher comes into the classroom, they need to convince their students to even want to listen to the next sentence and the next sentence. So that makes really a lot of sense. I think what you mentioned before about recency, when I asked you about the books, I think I'm just thinking out loud based on what you say. I think when teachers they read other books outside of the profession, they always have some recent, fresh ideas the next morning, because of whatever, a marketing book, a novel, or whatever. I think it's just stepping outside of your normal day-to-day life. Suddenly, you have more to talk about, and you have more starting points. I think in the classroom.
100%. I call it creative alchemy. So this idea that like whenever I've honored my outside interests and passions or been willing to develop new ones, it's always come back to inform my teaching because it's given me creative ammunition from other areas of life to draw back into my classroom, into my system, right? And so that's why I think it's just so important to unplug sometimes from education, go out and live life, experience things, develop new hobbies, new passions, new interests. It's not only good from the sense of like a self-care sense of unplugging and filling your bucket, kind of that kind of thing, but it's also going to even help your teaching because it's going to give you just a broader set of experiences to draw from.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so now we'll do a quick fire round of quick questions and answers. Okay, they are really short questions. Answer any answer is good. Teacher's role is becoming more important or marginal?
I think it's becoming more important. You mentioned the disruptive times. And so we are in very disruptive times right now and polarizing times and lots of conflict and transformation happening. And so a teacher's role, I think, to help kids navigate that is increasing in importance, not decreasing.
Technology in education has made things better for students or worse?
Used appropriately has made things better. When used inappropriately, it's it's made it worse. But I think overall, I'm going to lean towards it has made things better.
Education should be uniform and centralized or personalized and flexible?
I lean towards personalized and flexible, which is sometimes difficult in big systems. But I think within big systems, there's lots of opportunities to provide students with choice. Like maybe we're all going to learn the same content and curriculum, but maybe we can give choice in how they demonstrate their knowledge, for example, right? And so like, you need to know this, and this, but how you choose to demonstrate how you've learned that, we're going to give you some choice. Is like, do you want to create a video project around it? Do you want to do a speech? Do you want to write? Do you want to make a rap song? Or whatever it might be. There's ways that we can always try to embed some personalization and choice into what we do.
Yeah, I'm sure we could spend an entire hour only on this topic.
Yes.
So, great. The goal of education, is it to prepare workers or inspire individuals?
Well, you know where I'm going to fall on this.
Yes.
For me, it's absolutely to inspire individuals. And inspired individuals can then be easily adapt and become prepared for any career that they want. And so I think it's absolutely about inspiring individuals. And that is going to be the best way to prepare workers in the long run anyway.
Great. I have an AI question. I'll skip it. I think we answered that. Parents' involvement in education should be minimal or substantial?
Okay. So parental involvement should be substantial in support for their students and support for educators, but I think it should be minimal in curriculum decisions and choices and issues of pedagogy. And so, like, I do not like the idea of a group of loud and noisy parents showing up to a school board meeting and having books banned from students. That a professional educator has decided that this is the best book for my students to read in this case, and four parents show up at a school board meeting and end up getting the book banned or something like that. And so I think professional educators are the ones that should be making decisions about curriculum and instructional practices and pedagogy. but parents absolutely have a huge role in the support for their students and hopefully a support for the educational systems and for their teachers.
Great. Once again, this is a huge topic. Teachers
Yeah.
can get parents to be that kind of substantial support.
Yeah.
Standardized testing, is it essential or harmful?
I think the current iteration of it is harmful. However, I do understand the need for some sort of objective measure of whether students are learning anything in this system that we put them through for all these years. And so I do think there's a place for standardized testing. I think it's the overemphasis on it and the looking at that number without a fuller context, like a more holistic view of what's happening in the school, that is where it becomes harmful. The same thing with the individual student. Sometimes we label students sometimes based on their test scores without understanding that many students who don't have particularly high test scores are actually quite brilliant in many different areas and have huge potential. And then we track them in certain ways based on their test scores and maybe lower their expectations based on test scores, when really many of these students are unbelievably brilliant, but just maybe in a way that wasn't measured by that test.
Yeah. Curriculum should emphasize academic subjects or life skills?
So I think obviously we need a mix of both, but I am a little disappointed that we have not incorporated more life skill training in the educational system. I do want there to be curricular subjects. I do want kids to know their history. I do want kids to understand math, be able to read and be able to analyze literature. All these things I think are very important to be a well-rounded citizen and human being. Like I want that stuff in school still, but I also think we could do a better job of incorporating life skills. Just one example that always just kind of irks me is personal finance. And so we have kids who graduate and we send them out into the real world. And in some school systems, like they've had no exposure to any kind of sort of concepts of personal finance or anything like that. They don't understand compound interest. They don't understand credit cards. They don't understand how to do their taxes or tax implications of things. They don't understand investments. They don't understand any of these things. And yet we've had them for 12 years in some cases, 12, 13 years in our school system. And then we just throw them out into the real world where all these things are going to be very central to what's going to happen to them next in their life. And they're going to make decisions maybe that are going to be harmful for almost the rest of their life. And yet as a school system, we've just abdicated responsibility for teaching some of these very basic things.
Yeah. And their parents haven't learned it as well. So,
right.
So who would they learn from if not for TikTok and social media, which I think it does sometimes an amazing job at getting these subjects across, actually. Why do you think that is? Why don't schools have these as core subjects?
I've never understood the personal finance one, which is why I kind of throw that one out. I think we have just a very fixed mindset in what are the academic subjects. It's like science, math, English, history, and then we throw in a few electives here and there, right? But that's kind of like the core. But I really think we need to think more about what is going to be the realities that our kids are hit with when they step out, when they leave, when they get that piece of paper, that diploma, and they head out into the real world. What are they going to have to do? Or they're going to have to like know how to budget. They're going to have to know how much money do I need to get an apartment? And all these different things like this. So why is it so detrimental for me to put all this stuff onto a credit card and not pay it off? Like they have no concept of these things. And so I think it's just like, it's like negligence almost to send kids out into the world after being with us for the majority of their life.
Yeah.
And we haven't found any way to address these topics in many schools, not all schools, but in many schools.
Yeah. Okay. Homework, necessary or unnecessary?
I think in general, it's unnecessary. And so I lean towards, I didn't give homework in my class. If I did give homework, it was a much more personal and reflective nature. I'm asking them to personalize the material, to think about different things. But one of my tips for new teachers is I tell them, Whether you give homework or not, let me tell you a type of homework that you should never give. And this is my belief, and it's just more of a for practical reasons, not necessarily for some philosophical thing, is never give a homework assignment that a student has to have completed for your lesson to be successful. So that preliminary homework assignment, that homework that you all need to have done this so that tomorrow's lesson is going to be successful. If you set up your class that way, that is a recipe for disaster. So if I ever did give homework, it was always something reflective after a lesson, but the success of my lesson is never going to be based on students having completed something before they get there, or or you're absolutely putting yourself in a losing situation.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very good point. Discipline, strict or lenient?
I lean towards, I think I'm on the lenient side of this, which is probably not surprising after hearing the rest of the interview, right? I don't think that schools are places that where we need to make little mini prison systems or force compliance on issues, and in many cases that aren't that important. I think that noisy classrooms are sometimes where the most learning is taking place, the most collaboration and connection is taking place. So again, having a very sterile classroom situation is not where I would be headed. Does there need to be discipline? Yeah. Do there need to be consequences for a different thing? Yeah, absolutely. I think that is important, but I'm on the lenient side of this.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that, like, for example, when a kid questions a teacher, they see that as defiance. I think it's critical thinking skills. I think it's a survival skill in today's world. I don't want kids to believe something because I said it. I don't want them to believe it because they read it in a book, or because, God forbid, they saw it on the internet or something like that, right? And man, do we have a lot of adults that could learn that right now too? Like, we have a media literacy crisis in our country. And so I want kids to be actively, critically thinking about what is happening to them in the educational system, and be willing and able to question it if they think that there's something that's amiss, right? And so, but we're very quick to label that as defiance, when often it's just, like I said, in the real world, that's a survival skill.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Last one, grading should be based on performance or effort?
Okay, so this is complicated because I think it's two different measures, and both are important, but we tend to conflate the two. And so I think there is a place where we want to know whether kids are obtaining mastery of the material. And so I think there is a performance-based assessment that is important, because we don't want the kid who tries really hard, and they get the high grade, and then we realize afterwards that, well, yeah, but they still don't know how to read. That's problematic, right? So I think there needs to be some sort of measurement which measures mastery. But then I think we can't just stop there, but we have to have another measure which measures that idea of what kids are doing as far as their effort. And so I think one without the other is incomplete, and we have to have both. And I think we mix them together too often. I think they're measuring two very separate things. And so one grade that measures both of those is very difficult. And so I feel like it should be a separate measure.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. We covered so much. So this has been really awesome. Thank you. Is there any question that I didn't ask that I should have asked?
So I would like to tell them places they can connect with me.
Yes, please do. Please do.
All right. Hey, so if you are a podcast listener, which you must be because you're listening to this show, I have a show called The Dave Burgess Show. So on wherever you listen to podcasts, you can listen to The Dave Burgess Show. I'm a little inconsistent sometimes with getting episodes out, but there's over 50 up there. I would love to connect with you. If you're on X or Twitter, I still call it Twitter, I'm at Burgess Dave. My name just flipped around to Burgess Dave. If you're an Instagram person, I'm at DBC_INC. And if you are on TikTok, I'm also kind of inconsistent there, but I'm pirate.teacher on TikTok. Those are just some places you can connect with me. I have a website, daveburgess.com and daveburgessconsulting.com, but those are some social media places that you can connect with me. And I would love to not have this be a one-time thing. but I would love to connect with your listeners.
That's really, really excellent. And I really recommend, seeing your materials, visiting your websites, your wonderful list of books that you've published, of course, with the many, many great authors.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so just amazing. And once again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Oh,
much,
it was
Dave.
amazing to be on the show, and I'm honored that you asked me to join you.
Thank you so much.